Good morning, everyone. Lots going on, and as I was doing my usual morning rounds on Twitter, I follow Andrew Doyle, and he's the comedian who came up with Tatiana McGrath, and the ultra woke feminist who's all over Twitter, and he's funny, and Tatiana McGrath is funny, and like horribly offensive. But he says, my article in today's Mail, daily newspaper in the UK, on Sunday about how critical race theory has infiltrated many schools in the UK. And he says, I'm getting many messages asking for more context. If you want to see what happens when critical race theory is brought into schools, watch the Channel 4 documentary, I mentioned in the article, and he lists a documentary here, and it's very interesting. The whole thread is really interesting. You should watch it. And if you are interested in watching my documentary on critical race theory in Canadian schools, well, I've put that together, and I don't have half the budget of Channel 4. But here it is in its 5-part entirety, and well, there's going to be more videos probably today. So there's lots of interesting content here to check out. If you're interested, please have a look. The link's in the description. And I think that it's interesting to note how coordinated this is across the left, across the West, the West. And why is this happening, right? Like, why are school boards in the UK dealing with exactly the same failed theory being shoved down their throats at exactly the same time it's being shoved down our throats here in Canada? Why is that? I wonder how that works. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, moving on, here's some Toronto news, and you'll understand why I'm showing you this in the context of our Canadian political system in just a second. But Canada Buster says dozens of people stabbed, at least 5 killed, 1 person killed after being pushed into an oncoming train. Just another weekend in Toronto. But what does Aaron O'Toole highlight? So this tweet was sent 17 hours ago. 2 hours later, 15 hours ago, Aaron O'Toole sends, saddened by this tragic news from Etobicoke of a fatal stabbing outside of a mosque, I want to offer my condolences to the family of the victim and the Muslim community at large. Remember Pandy Andy? Remember Pandering Andrew Scheer? Well, I guess the Conservative Party is exactly where they were before, with a brand new leader who's better and less dimples and connects more with the center of Canadian politics, right? But it's exactly the same party doing exactly the same thing, pandering to exactly the same groups. And why do they think that it'll get a different result? What about the rest of the people? What about the person pushed into a train? What about the other 5 people killed? What about other people who were stabbed? You just want to talk about one? What about Toronto violence as a whole, Mr. O'Toole? What about that? Why are you specifically engaging with this specific one? Could you explain that? No? This is an interesting graphic. What's that red? Is that Canadian red? I don't know. Conservative Party says the Communist Chinese government is blocking a COVID vaccine from coming to Canada despite the fact that the Trudeau Liberals gave the regime in Beijing our tax dollars to develop it. Sign here if you think it's time to put Canada first. Now, this has been a trend, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second, because here's a thread to go through regarding China and their misinformation campaign, their social media campaign, their war machine that Canada we're not even on the battlefield. Canada's not even on the battlefield. In fact, the CPC's or CCP, the Chinese Communist Party's online social media war machine and bots and real people pushing their narrative is so sophisticated, Canada's doesn't even register. And what Canada's similar army, similar infrastructure is tuned towards is modifying Canadians' perception. I don't know that we're doing anything on the level that the CCP is doing, but it's incredible. But I want to point out, the sign here if you think it's time to put Canada first. This is just collecting your data. This is giving them permission to fundraise off of you. This is like the problem with modern political parties. Every single one of them, all of them, they're driven by money, and money pushes the need for money pushes the need for fundraising like this, and the need for fundraising like this pushes the need to collect email addresses. But signing this doesn't do anything other than giving the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada, your contact details for them to get money from you, for them to lobby you to say, please give us your money to fight this thing that you care about, insert this thing that you care about, right, that you signed up for. And does that meaningfully address things? Well, I guess kind of in our society it does, right? Because that's money being put towards people who are fighting this. But really, I mean, it goes back into this giant machine. And what have we seen from the conservatives that's really said, yeah, they're willing to fight for us, right? I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen all of the policies that are coming out are similar to the Liberals, and we knew that. We knew that under Scheer. I wanted to give the CPC the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe they would be a Canada first party for a little while, but no, they went totally globalist right off the hop and doing exactly the same thing. And I think that they are silly to expect a different outcome. Okay, here is the thread on the Chinese. Well, their social media campaign and their online assets, because man, like in the modern world, this is the battlefield. Welcome to it, right? Like this is it. And here we go. I'm not going to explain this. I'll let this thread explain this. One of 5. There's more than 5. The New York Times article by Paul Moser is a smoking gun on the genesis of the coronavirus lockdowns. According to the article, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, launched a massive social media campaign in Italy to advertise its coronavirus lockdown measures in early March. The fact that the CCP's disinformation campaign focused heavily on Italy is crucial. Italy was the first country outside of China to lock down. The rest of the world followed Italy's lead. Wikipedia reference. But CCP's campaign wasn't limited to Italy. The article states that this tweet advertising China's lockdown policy to the world is fake. It has 142,000 likes. Tweets like this prove CCP was actively selling the world on Wuhan-style lockdowns in early March. How long did that take, right? How long did the struggle session take for Miss Lucky to find racism at the RCMP? I really should get Where's Gail t-shirts. But really, like you can struggle session people into believing anything. Here's number 4. Next, if you search the URL of that fake tweet and gives the URL, you'll find it retweeted by many accounts around the world. Each account is suspicious. They tweet incessantly about COVID until Floyd's death, then solely about Black Lives Matter. The sheer scale of this operation and the number of accounts involved and its influence around the world is really remarkable. Thousands of accounts tweeting incessantly about COVID hysteria, then pivoting to incessant Black Lives Matter and anti-police propaganda in every country. The day after Paul Moser's New York Times article was published, Twitter suspended over 170,000 fake Chinese accounts. But none of these fake accounts involved in the ring described above were suspended. The problem is much larger than Twitter acknowledges, and there's a New York Times report about that. 7 of 5. More than 50 NIH scientists fired due to Chinese ties, hundreds more under investigation. By co-opting scientists and academics while aggressively promoting lockdowns through social media propaganda, China made lockdown pseudoscience seem sound. Through CCP's influence, operations in media, politics, and academia were surreptitious. Oh, I got that wrong. Totally, sorry. Its stance in support of global adoption of COVID lockdowns was explicit. Here is China's foreign spokesperson promoting strict social distancing among children, which is just unbelievable. And I'm not sure if there's actually more here. Hold on. I'd prefer it if they put fin at the end or like done the thread or something to that effect if they're done. But anyway, that one appears done. But the scale of the disinformation campaign being waged, regardless of whether it's bankrolled by China or a product of the Chinese Communist Party or what, I don't know. But it's massive. And it seems like the Chinese Communist Party would be at least building assets like this, right? Like that would at least be in the wheelhouse. I think that it's odd that Canada seems to be behind the 8 ball on this. I don't know where Trump is at on this. I think probably the CIA has their own bot farms and pushing their own. Reddit is owned by Tencent, which is a Chinese company, right? Which is why it turned in the last couple of years and it's no longer what it used to be. 2008 to 2012 or 13 was kind of the golden years of Reddit. And then it was sold to Condé Nast and some other owners and bad CEOs. And then all of a sudden now Tencent has a massive, I think it's Tencent anyway, a Chinese company, has a massive stake in it. And it's the conversation has turned. Censorship has become the order of the day. And if you don't comply with their newspeak, then you get culled, right? That's a level, like Reddit was the most popular website in the world, right? That is a government taking over the conversation. That is a Chinese government taking over a Western website to turn the conversation to make sure that anti-Chinese propaganda doesn't get out, right? That isn't discussed as much. It's the level is just, we are bringing horses onto a battlefield with nuclear weapons and a button. Like they're on a fully other level. and they are influencing everything, even our elected politicians. Here's Patty Haydu, and this is Alex Pearson, and she is award-winning journalist, TV host, AM 640, and she says, China lied to the world about the virus, then bought up the world's supply of PPE, leaving countries without. Canada then handed them another 16 tons, putting our frontline workers at risk. There's no defending this or China. Right, Patty Haydu? Oh, hold my beer. Health Minister continues defense of China's handling of coronavirus case data, right? Health Minister Patty Haydu continues to defend the Chinese government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, saying all countries have difficulties calculating the extent of the virus spread. In an interview with the West Bloc's Mercedes Stephenson, Haydu was asked about her comments earlier in the year when she dismissed as a conspiracy theory a question about whether China had underreported their cases and the severity of the new highly contagious disease. Quote, you had dismissed that as a conspiracy theory. In retrospect, do you think that China was honest and was forthcoming in the intelligence it shared with the global community and with Canada about the risks? Stevenson asked. Look, early on, China alerted the World Health Organization to the emergency of a novel coronavirus and also shared the sequencing of the gene, which allowed countries to be able to rapidly produce tests to be able to detect it in their own countries, Haydu said. I think the phenomenon of underreporting is going to be something that we hear about across the world because, of course, as pandemics come and as we see surges, it is very difficult to determine how many people are sick at a given time and how many people are having adverse outcomes. She said every country has been grappling with the incredible demand on data systems. It is difficult when you're in the middle of a crisis to do that through accounting. I scroll down a little bit. Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel-Garner argued Haydu's continued defense of the Chinese government's handling of the outbreak are among several factors related to her management of the pandemic that raise questions about whether she should stay in the job. I think there's issues with trust right now, and for Canadians to trust her after all this, I think it's a big leap, Rempel-Garner said on the West Block. That's something I think the government needs to address. The virus was first detected spreading in Wuhan on December 31st, 2019, but multiple reports citing leaked intelligence data south of the border suggest there may have been circulating data earlier in the fall. So you think that this was an honest mistake by the Chinese and not a deliberate effort to conceal? Stevenson asked again. Quote, I'm not going to speculate, Mercedes. It's really hard to understand except through the lens of Canada's experience and as Minister of Health, Haydu said. You couldn't possibly understand. It's my lived experience and I can't explain it to you. Back to this. I can tell you that when everything is happening all at once, it can be very difficult, especially depending on the legacy data systems and you may or may not have. So listen, what I can say is the world needs to work together right now and we need to ensure we're working in full partnership to defeat COVID-19. Oh, back to the talking point. I don't know why they keep talking about these legacy data systems. Like, I think the only system that really we need to worry about being overwhelmed is the healthcare emergency system. And other than that, these legacy data systems and, oh, we can't track this. Get real. Like, this is another distraction talking about overwhelming a system that sounds too complicated for the average person to understand. Back to this. I scroll down a little bit. The comments now come in light of the decision by the Chinese authorities to block shipments of vaccine materials that were supposed to be delivered to Canada under a multi-million-dollar research deal between the Chinese company CanSino Biologics and the National Research Council. Experts suggest, I love unnamed experts, some people who fill on the couch. China's failure to approve these shipments comes down to geopolitics and possible retaliation for the detention of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou by Canada. As well, Beijing last week honored what it called the heroes of the fight against coronavirus, but made coronavirus? Okay, that's a class of viruses, not COVID-19, so that's interesting. The heroes of the fight against coronavirus. Yes, get that common cold. Ooh, okay, but made no mention of Li Weilang, a Chinese doctor, who said he was punished when he tried to raise the alarm bells about a new infectious disease spreading in Wuhan. He later died from the virus. Right, so again, this is influencing their disinformation campaign, the CCP or whoever has started this. That is influencing our elected officials, even our health minister, right? Here's Brian Lilly, and he says, not only did Justin Trudeau government greatly diminish the PPE in the national emergency stockpile before COVID-19 hit, but they also disbanded a team that acted as an early warning system for infectious diseases. Read and retweet. So mismanagement, incompetence. Here's Ezra. He says, Trudeau's CBC state broadcaster is spreading disinformation about the virus. The real news today is that a province with 14.5 million people has just 39 people in the hospital, with 268 hospitals in Ontario. Each patient gets 7 hospitals. Source. And I mean, it's incredible, the fear mongering, right? Ontario is reporting 204 new cases of COVID-19. Health Minister Christine Elliott says 64% of today's cases are people under the age of 40. What about the deaths? Oh, no deaths. No deaths yesterday. Right. Oh, good. Oh, the 12th, I guess. And this one just made me absolutely howl. We'll read it because it made me laugh. Anti-mask protest in Montreal draws large crowd propelled by U.S. conspiracy theories. Attacks intensify. Okay. Several thousand people gathered Sunday in downtown Montreal to hear speeches from conspiracy theorists and anti-vaccine activists in one of the largest demonstrations to date against the Quebec government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Hare Krishnas marched alongside Christian fundamentalists and supporters of U.S. President Donald Trump, as if those were equal, right? Like, the religious fundamentalists and people who support President Trump. Okay. Others held signs about the 5G internet network or perceived corruption at the United Nations. Just really quick, I want to remind everybody what the United Nations said about men. The COVID-19 pandemic is demonstrating what we all know. A millennium of patriarchy have resulted in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture which damages everyone, women, men, girls, and boys. Right. Yeah, okay, that's totally legitimate. Back to this. There are legitimate criticisms of the United Nations, and you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to believe that, okay? So and the fact that the newspaper is trying to shame anyone who has a differing opinion, notice that, right? Notice that. They're lumping lots of very different people all together and saying, oh yeah, they're nuts. They're nuts. Back to this. I decided to come today to say enough, says Montrealer Andre David, 75. We've been manipulated enough. The most popular symbols at the protest, be it on shirts, placards, or flags, belong to QAnon, a far-right conspiracy theory started in the United States that claims a satanic pedophile cabal secretly controls the United States government, if not the entire world. QAnon was labeled as a national security risk by the FBI in 2019 after individuals began committing acts of violence based on the mistaken belief that the theory is true. Mistaken belief that the theory is true. I like it. I mean, usually they just ignore things they don't want people to talk about, but now they're trying to actively debunk it. Where we go one, we go all. Indeed. Back to the coronavirus stuff, though. Here's the National Post asking, the Monk debate, did we overreact to COVID-19? Well, at least somebody is asking, somebody serious, and Monk is seen as serious. I think we did overreact to COVID-19, and why do I think that? Because Sweden didn't. And look at their daily deaths. This is the daily death chart in Sweden as of September 12th. That's 2 days ago, and unless we're going to see a really big spike at the end of that chart, well, it seems like building herd immunity was the right move. And that's science, right? This is an active situation that happened. We can see it. We can see who died. We can protect those segments of the population. And yet we're hearing vaccines. Here's moving into we're like 15 minutes into this, so I understand this is long, but moving into the politics of the day. Justin Trudeau's throne speech is going to be next week, the 23rd, and they're on their getaway, their discussion about what's going to be in the throne speech. And here's Global News reporting. Originally focused on building a post-pandemic economy, the meeting will now also have to contend with the immediate challenge of limiting the damage from a second wave. Okay. And here's two liberals are talking about this. Here's Rachel Bendian, and she's the MP for Outremont. And she says, it's time to reinvent our social safety net here in Canada. I'm proud to sponsor this resolution for a Canadian basic income for our Liberal Party political convention in November. We have a unique opportunity to rethink the Canada of tomorrow. And here's Julie. I'm not going to attempt that because I'm going to mess that up. But she's the MP for Davenport. And she says, as one of 6 Liberal MPs who co-sponsored a resolution on Canadian basic income, I'm grateful to my colleagues who voted for our resolution to be fast-tracked to the floor of our national convention in November. They're really pushing for this UBI, like this universal basic income. My question is the same as this Toronto Sun editorial. Who's going to pay for the socialist utopia? Because I saw a tweet, and I probably should have saved it, but it was from a Russian who basically said, like, the less incentive there is to go to work, the less people go to work. And if you think that that's wrong, like, that's not wrong. That was a poor case. I'll find that tweet later. Hold on. And so here's a couple of articles. But really, if you incentivize people to sit home, they're going to sit home. If you incentivize people to go on the curb instead of going back to work, they're going to go on the curb, right? If you can get $400 a week for whatever becomes the next CRB or whatever the next DI is, instead of indexed to what you were making before. And yeah, there are challenges, there are pitfalls to this, but we need to stimulate the economy to make up for the lack of ability for the government to just take care of everyone and print enough money for everyone. That's not realistic. But the economy can take care of everyone if you let people go back to work, if you allow people to open up, if you follow Sweden's example, right? If you allow people to generate herd immunity, and if you protect the most what's the word, susceptible, I don't see a problem with it. And yet here's iPolitics. It says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his front bench are set to spend the next 2 days sequestered behind closed doors as they go over the final draft of a make or break speech from the throne. There you go. Trudeau promises ambitious throne speech, but says he doesn't want fall election. I don't know. The spending that he's doing over a top and the UBI talk says to me election. And yesterday I mentioned Jagmeet Singh and him saying this is the line in the sand. We're going to look at another line in the sand in a minute. I don't think there's a way the NDP votes against this. I don't think we're going to an election other than Trudeau's maneuvering here to make it look like electioneering. Like all of the announcements that I've seen from him over the last couple of days all look like electioneering, all look like election announcements, spending in liberal-friendly places to make sure they get those votes, right? Anyway, here it is. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stressed Wednesday that he doesn't want a fall election, but he was clear his government will have a bold vision to offer in the coming throne speech if the opposition parties push for a trip to the polls. I've been very clear the government has no interest in seeing an election this fall, he said. It will be up to the opposition parties to decide whether or not they have confidence in the plans this government is going to put forward to help Canadians to build a better future. After proroguing Parliament last month and shutting down several committees looking into the We Charity scandal, the Liberals will return to the House of Commons in less than 2 weeks on September 23rd with a throne speech. Trudeau has said it will aim to build Canada back better than it was before the pandemic. Few details on the throne speech are available, but several reports indicate the government aims to bring in billions in new spending on top of the record-setting COVID-related deficits. Previously, Trudeau had said a debt-to-GDP ratio of 30% is a fiscal anchor on government spending, but he declined Wednesday to specify the government would set new limits on borrowing. And I'm going to reference the finance minister has zero experience. She's talked to lots of people who would know, but that is not the same as having somebody in the job able to take in that experience. And, let me give you an example. If you are a Python programmer and you sit down and have a conversation with somebody who wants a website, you would be just for example, if you're building a website in Python, if you're building it in something else, then build it in something else. Replace it with whatever. Let's just stick with Python. It's easy. Versus sitting down with somebody and talking with somebody who wants a website and then speaking to people who would know Python on how to do it. Would you deliver the same website as the person who's competent? No. Then why do we have a finance minister who is a journalist? She may be a smart journalist, but if you've never programmed a website before, you're probably not going to do a good job on your first one. Back to this. Previously, Trudeau had said, I said that already. Trudeau said that the throne speech would be focused on making sure that all Canadians have a real fair chance to succeed, recognizing the inequities that COVID-19 has highlighted, knowing that the future of jobs and opportunities for Canadians involves making sure we're reducing our carbon emissions. He said he doesn't regret the billions the government spent on Canadians during the early days of the pandemic because it prevented Canadians from having to go deeper into debt on their own credit cards. I scroll down. Trudeau said he would be reaching out to the opposition parties in advance of the speeches and said his government had consistently been open to suggestions. I think this is interesting. That's not Trudeau's style. Typically, he didn't reach out to Jagmeet Singh last time. So I'm gonna be watching for this. I'm gonna be interested to see if he actually does reach out to the opposition parties, because usually he just goes out and does it. So assuming and behaving as if he's got a majority government. See the last 6 months. Okay, back to this. He said returning economic activity is a good sign, but it has to be done carefully or Canada will face restrictions and lockdowns again. I don't think there will be tolerance for lockdowns again. People are approaching me now, and kids are jealous of people unmasked and coming and talking about this, taking masks off, moving masks. It's happening faster than you think. It's happening faster than I expected. Here's Jagmeet Singh. The government will deliver a speech from the throne later this month. Has Jagmeet Singh drawn the line in the sand for what it will take for him to support it? More, whatever. Here it is.
The Liberals put on what you've called the so-called poison pill. You said you're ready. What is the poison pill you're actually talking about? What's this line in the sand?
Well, the general sense is this, that our position is, given that people are worried about CERB ending, people are afraid, they're uncertain about what's going to happen, And there's at least over 1 million Canadians that cannot be helped unless there's legislative changes that will include those Canadians into any future support. That's our priority. We want to get help to Canadians. Small businesses that I've been speaking to are telling us that they're worried about some of their supports ending and the fact that they are unable to get back to their business levels that they used to be at. So we want to help people out. That's our priority, not finding a way for this government to fall.
The speech on the throne is coming up. You said you're not.
So they're not looking to drop the government, and the Conservatives said the same thing. We're not looking to drop the government, not looking to bring this government down. But at the same time, the Liberals they're electioneering, and I've heard, and I shared with everybody watching, that the Liberals and the Conservatives have rented planes. I don't think the NDP would rent planes yet. Save that for the last week of the campaign. But yeah, there's lots of very interesting movements going on, despite all of the leaders saying, no, we're not looking to do this. We're not looking to trigger an election. We're not. How do you hold the government accountable if they come back with taking the country in a completely different direction? You know, more spending, more universal basic income, more whatever. And say, well, our top priority is getting help for Canadians, not holding the government accountable for the massive lies that they've been telling, or the lack of accountability and transparency for the programs and the programs that are enriching friends and family of key cabinet members and the Prime Minister himself. You know, like this is a big scandal that is like being rebranded as, we want to help Canadians. You want to help Canadians? Get the government out of the way and open us up and allow us to run our businesses. That's how you help Canadians, not with doubling down on government spending and increasing the speed of the printing press to get that money out, right? Like, holy cow, you've got to give. Well, I don't have all the solutions. I certainly don't have all the solutions. You have to make it a transition period. You have to do it responsibly. You have to give people the chance to spin up their business because things have been slow recently and because of the government mandated lockdowns. So how do you fix it? You open us up. Right? Okay, that's pretty much the end. There's a couple more tabs, but they don't really matter. Well, yeah, no, they don't really matter. I'll leave them in if you want to check them out. Check them out in the description. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful